Or not?
Oh shit.
I don't see anything, Robert. Hi everyone, I'm Freddie Laker and welcome to another O Ship Show. This week we're chatting with Isabelle Fevrier, the CEO of Mansur Gavriel. So for those of you who haven't joined the show before, or this is tuning back in after not seeing a couple episodes, just want to remind you the general premise of the show. The show focuses on leadership, and it focuses on entrepreneurs, but most importantly, it focuses on people that have lessons that they've learned through what I sometimes like to refer to as O-ship moments. It's a show that celebrates, I think, some of the more challenging times that people have had in their career, potentially even moments of failure, or certainly at a minimum moments of adversity. We love to hear these stories from successful people because I think there's a lot of shows out there and a lot of interviews you see that have people share their kind of glory moments and their greatest triumphs. But I think giving people an opportunity to take those moments of adversity and share what they learned from them can really help transform how each of us maybe approaches similar challenges, or if nothing else, makes us feel better when we're going through some of the challenging times we are right now during COVID. So, Isabelle, if you haven't had a chance to research her with any of the pre-messages we've sent about this, she's had an incredible career. She's currently the CEO of Mansur Gavriel, which is an incredible fashion company. She has had senior roles at Ralph Lauren. She's had senior roles at DFS-LVMH, and even worked at Cartier. So, I think it's pretty easy to say that you're an expert in the, let's say, called the intersection of the fashion and luxury world. I know you're a very humble person, so I can say that for you, even if you won't say it about yourself. And I'd love to understand, how this all started. Maybe even understand what your first leadership role was.
My first leadership role was actually at Christian Dior. So after a couple of different jobs in very different industries, I started in advertising and then moved to management consulting, and then thought about, okay, you need to to find your way. I went into Christian Dior just at a time when Bernard Arnault had decided to stop the license for leather goods. And I thought that was a great opportunity. I put up my hand, and from one day to the next, I ended up being given really the leadership of the newly created leather good department. So that was my first experience of leadership at a very young age, and truly not knowing anything about what I was about to embark on.
Do you mind me asking, you said it was at a young age, how old were you exactly when you got your first leadership role?
I was probably like 26 at the time, 26, 28. I mean, 26, 28, something like that. Actually, 26, I think. And I ended up having to, create this department, pulling people together, launch my first collection. It was an interesting time.
That's could be imagined quite intimidating. Do you mind me asking, when you think about your first leadership role, especially doing it at a fairly young age, any advice for maybe other people who are getting their first leadership roles in their 20s, and there could be challenges around respect and so on, how people perceive you? Obviously it's scary, even maybe not even feeling like there could be confidence issues there for some folks. Anything you remember about that moment that maybe you learned from that you could share?
Right. There's so many things, but what you just mentioned about age, for sure, I ended up having a person on my team that was much older than I was. I had much more experience, I thought, and she always seemed to know it all when I always felt that I knew nothing, and I didn't know what I would. But very, in a way, without my realizing, and it was thanks to really people around me that I went and asked for counsel. they made me realize that actually she was learning from me, and that the two of us were sort of a good team, and that she wanted to come and she wanted to work for me. So it was an interesting realization. I think I put myself in this frame of mind that, I'm not going to be good enough. I'm not going to be good enough. She will know everything, as opposed to understanding that it was quite normal for me not to know everything, because I didn't. But there were things I could bring to the party, and there were things that she could together would be sort of both much stronger. And that lesson for me. And the second lesson was, since I didn't know much about it, it's okay. Just say that you don't know, ask. And if you ask in questions and to help in general, there are very few people that will say, I can't, give you 30 minutes. I can't to explain one thing. So once I got just go and ask and say, look, help, I found that all the doors opened. And so this request for help was was a big help for me.
That's great. I love that. It makes me think about when I had my kind of first leadership role outside of my own business. I had a company called LakerNet, and they wasn't quite the marketer I am today, so that was the best clever name I could come up with, and ended up joining this other company. And I was always consider myself kind of a tech guy, and they asked me to join this company, and they said, look, Freddie, we want you to be the director of sales. I said, I can't do the director of sales thing. I'm a tech guy. I don't want to do that. And they said, well, we're gonna, we'll pay you this much if you'll do the director of sales role, and this is the compensation package. And I said, I'd love to be the director of sales. And I, kind of rolled up my sleeves and took the spot on. And when I joined the team, I had, I think it was 6 or 7 guys on the team and every one of them, I say guys, which are people, but every one of them was older than me. Some of them quite significantly older than me. And I remember calling my father up, asking for advice, and I said, Dad, I have no idea how to manage these people. What do I do? And he said, he goes, if you're worried about them respecting you, he goes, if you work harder than any of them and just kind of lead by example, don't tell them to do anything for just a little while. Right. They'll assuming you do everything right, they'll kind of fall in line. And I remember just kind of going in there and work. I don't know if I was smarter than them, but I certainly tried to work harder than any of them for a couple of months, so that they so I could earn their respect. Right. So yeah. When you think about where you went on from there, and again, you've had some pretty incredible roles in your career. Is there a moment you kind of look across it and think, this was my kind of beyond all the peaks? What was your greatest failure? Is where I'm going with this.
I mean, one of my greatest failures was really that very first job, right, where I was told, okay, you have 6 months to launch your first collection. Every single possible mistake that you can make on a collection, I mean, I made them all, to the point where when we finally, came up with the bags, sold the bags, half of the bags fell because this was Christian Dior. Half of them then came back because I didn't know that you needed, as soon as a drop of rain, water would hit a bag, there would be, a bulb come out of it. So I can tell you, half of that production, came back to us. So that was not a very easy. A small company. Bernard Arnault, who's the chairman of LVMH, was very, very involved at Christian Dior. He was in our offices twice a week. I personally went to see him with my little products once a week. So the pressure was on. It was highly visible. This wasn't buried in the middle of nowhere. I had to report back to him face to face that, that right now the first collection hadn't quite gone to plan. So that was a difficult moment. I went and apologized, profusely, because I was mortified with myself for making This was just one mistake, but there were so many mistakes. And in the end, he said, look, as long as you learn from these and you don't make that mistake again, I think we'll be good. So he was very graceful and gracious, and we moved.
Sounds like a good boss. Yeah. Any big kind of learnings you took away from that?
Yeah, not necessarily always, but in that case.
It was a good day. Yeah, any big learnings?
Yes, he had a good day that day. Learnings, yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the big thing was that first of all, mistakes happen, and everybody makes mistakes at some point. So I think this transparency, the fact that I did go to say that I had made those mistakes and those were the consequences, and I think that goes a very long way, and it's very much part of who I am today. The way I work with my teams today is very focused on being in confidence and having the ability to go and admit your mistakes, because as long as the mistake is on the table and everybody knows about it, then you can all work together to solve it. So I always encourage parents, never hide. If you hide something, it will
always
only boomerang back. In transparency of information, is very important to me.
I love that. I think there's something worth being said as well, that for I think the further you get into your career, the more important I think this kind of transparency is, because I think and it sounds terrible, but in a corporate environment, it's like no one's ever got anything over you. You've always been up front about where you've been successful and where you've had challenges, and there's no I hate saying it this way, but I'm gonna say it anyway. No body's buried anywhere that someone's going to challenge you with in the future. And it's not only is it the best way to, I think, operate professionally, but I think it can also be quite liberating, because you never have to worry about what's happened out in the past. So I have a lot of respect for you for doing that. It's great. I guess if we jumped around a little bit, and we look at again through some of the roles you've had later in your career, and you look back and reflect on how you got there, is there a biggest influence that's kind of guided your path?
I think again, there are many answers to your questions, but one of them would be that I suppose when I first worked at Dior, and I worked there for 7 years, when I left, it was a very difficult decision to leave that job, which was my perfect. I loved it, and it was a perfect spot for me. But in the end, was a realization that when I was going to be 60 or 70 years old and reflected upon my life, a little bit like what you're asking now, it wouldn't all be about a job, that a job is a job, but it would be more about the journey and what I had gained around it. So one of the things that has been a motor to me is, what is going to be the next experience? What am I going to learn from it? It's okay not to know, and it's okay. You shouldn't be afraid. I'm not afraid of you should not be afraid of the unknown and of making a move. So for a very long time, I always thought, what, you can do anything. I mean, anything you put your mind to for like 2 years, it doesn't work out. You can always move on and do something else. And it's never quite turned out that way, because after 2 years, you make things work and you're happy and you continue. But it's enabled me sometimes to make those difficult decisions of leaving, moving my whole family. I have 3 kids and a husband that works, and having those, dual careers and the 3 kids, and being able to move across the world, for instance, and do that with always the optic that you can always go back home. You can always go back. But this idea of adventure and of learning more and differently has always, spurred me along.
Hey, I'm going to go back to a conversation we were having a second ago around transparency. And We got a question from someone in the audience. Again, I encourage anyone who's watching or listening right now, if you've got something you want to ask, feel free to put it in chat on any of the platforms we're on, whether you're on Twitter or YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. So Adam Tovum has asked, a lot of people talk about failing upwards these days. Does Isabelle think that that comes from having confidence and transparency? This concept of failing upwards. Do you think that's a confidence and transparency thing, or do you think that comes from other maybe potential leadership characteristics that people have?
So you're gonna have. I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to explain what failing upwards means.
So this concept of failing upwards is this concept that basically by constantly effectively attempting to move forward with things and testing out new concepts and testing new ideas and just always attempting something, that yes, you'll have failures along the way, but you constantly will kind of move in a positive direction effectively. Because what's the old saying? It's like the people that if you don't try, you'll never succeed kind of thinking. So
right. Right.
And so I guess he's asking us like this, making the most of failures. Do you think that concept comes along? Do you think the people that fail upwards, do you think that's closely intertwined in this concept of confidence and transparency? I guess is the question he's trying to ask.
I would say for me, as you explained the concept, the first thing that comes to mind is just to be also honest with yourself. Yeah, right. Because I'm not sure if maybe it's transparency with yourself, but you move forward and you try new things and you have the confidence. I mean, for many reasons. One, some of it just comes from you and who you are as an individual. A lot of it also comes from the people that you surround yourself with. So I must really admit that a lot of my confidence I gained with the person who's now my husband, because I was a French. I tended to be quite shy and quiet, and he was a bit more of your sort of American, a bit louder, but and a guy who was sure of himself, and he very often helped me go forward and help in taking some of those risks, because he used to say to me, you can do it, God damn it, Isabelle, go and do it, you can do it. So he really was instrumental in pumping me up and to have courage, especially in those early years, to go for it. So I think you need to have that network around you of support, whoever it is, but that's going to encourage you in those moments of doubts, so that you keep going even when you fail.
Love that.
You're not going to die. You'll be stronger.
Yeah. I also love the concept you mentioned of just being transparent with yourself. I think a lot of people aren't able to reflect on that way, and I think it's an imperative. You mentioned your husband. Do you have any kids?
Yeah, so I have 3 boys that are now, actually one is turning 19 on Saturday. Wow. The other one is 21 and 23. So
all right, so
I've had my hands full. I've been surrounded by men. Yes.
Wow. Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Four boys in the house, or 4 men now, right? As well.
Exactly. Yes.
What was that like? I mean, again, I've noted a couple of times you've had some very senior roles in some very big organizations. How did you manage to do that? And do you think that was it challenging, or are there any misconceptions that people may have about being able to have a high power career and also raising, which is frankly a significant family? I mean, 3 kids is no joke.
Right. Yeah, 3 boys is no joke. Yes. So I think, again, I'm going to sound like I'm tooting his horn. Thank God he's not around. But again, when I got married and embarked upon that journey with my husband, we made a pact that we would be a team, right? And that we're really like 2 equals with 2 careers, 2 ambitions, and we would work through whatever challenges we we had together. And that's very much how we've just embraced our lives. So I am very clear that one of the main reasons why I have been able to have this sort of career, move around the world a couple of times, and have 3 kids is one of the empowering factors is that I've been in a team with my spouse or my partner, and so that meant things like very basic things like we both traveled a lot for our jobs. So it meant that we spent time together with our schedules to make sure that one of us was going to be with the kids. So that was one of our rules, that whether it be me or him, one of us had to be home. And so we planned a lot of our travels that way, which actually once meant that for almost 2 years, we barely saw each other because our emphasis was being present with the kids. So they've been, again, it's not a fairy tale. It's something that was important to me. It's something that was important to him. Family was important. And I think you need to get yourself quite organized. But it's possible. We didn't have family around us. We didn't rely on mothers, or I wish we could have. It would have made things easier, but we didn't. So you just figure out a way to make it, possible. And the fact that the kids accepted him just as they accepted me, and he could cook dinner just as actually much better than I can cook dinner, all that worked. That the kids knew that one of us would be there. So that's been instrumental. If he had not been there, if I had been alone with my 3 kids, I think it would have been very hard.
Very serious and important question, being to play into every French stereotype. Given that you guys are the masters of good food and wine, did you straighten your American husband out and get him to be cook decent French food?
Yeah, he cooks pretty well. He cooks pretty well. One of the things we had similar, I suppose, values, and he comes from actually a Greek sort of background and family thing. So he cooks some good Greek food, which is great.
Okay, that's good. It mixes it up in the house. So if you had anyone out there who maybe, and again, you could speak to either male or female people in the audience right now, but thinking about this journey you went on as both what sounds like a pro league mom and a pro league professional. Is there any advice you'd give to someone who wanted to emulate your career, whether that was in terms of the seniority of the roles you're doing, or maybe even specifically in the fashion or luxury space?
Right. It's not, I suppose, it's not a straight line, and you can't plan it all. So you have to be ready to just roll with it. You make decisions. You decide whether you're going to accept that job. You decide whether you're going to move around the world. And once you decide, I've always said you need to move on, and there's no regrets, right? It's like you've thought about this. Sometimes it takes weeks to come to a decision, but once you decide, you go forward and you move on with it. The fact that I've moved around, that we had 2 careers, also when I say it's not a straight line, the reality of it is I started from the bottom of the company. I mean, really junior jobs twice in my career. And you've got to be willing to do that. And each time, suddenly my salary was cut in by 2/3. From going to leading big teams, I ended up leading a team of 2, and I had to prove myself again. So you've got to be ready to start again. And, and I was. So I think there are people who would, I think it depends what you want to do with your life and what in the end is going to be meaningful to you. If I had wanted, I don't know, if being a CEO had been, my dream in life, I should have stayed in Paris. Yeah. And I should have just stayed there and worked in that fashion industry till the end. And maybe I would have gotten there 10 years earlier. Yeah. But this was not my path.
Yeah. I don't know how many people necessarily dream of being a CEO. My mother always likes to tell the story that when I was, my father was a CEO, and when I was growing up, she, apparently I used to tell the teachers, they'd be like, what do you want to be one day? And I used to tell them I wanted to be a businessman. I didn't know what that meant. but I wanted to be a businessman, which I thought was pretty funny. You said earlier that you have no regrets. Now you also said you've got no regrets to move forward. But I wanted to double check: is there really no regrets?
No. There's not on my. So I have one, deeply personal regret that is linked to my mom, and unfortunately not being there when she passed away.
Mm.
But apart from that very deeply personal regret, no, because you don't have time for that. Yeah, I mean, otherwise you'll spend all your time going backwards and thinking about, well, I could have done this, I should have said that. So be it. It's done. You move forward. What I keep telling myself is, what can you learn? What did you learn from it, and how can you be different? So that's kind of, I don't have regrets.
Do you mind me? And first of all, I love that. And do you mind me asking, is your father still around?
No.
You said you were
not. No.
Yeah, my really empathizing with you. So my father's not around anymore, but my mother still is. And when my father passed away, I had a similar real feelings. I wasn't there with him when he passed, and I really started thinking back. I thought about all the times he'd invited me to, whether it was have dinner, go out. He'd love to go out on his boat, and I always, I was in my 20s. We had a very large age gap between us. I think he was 55 when I was born. He was 84 when he died. I always had something else I had to do. It's all the lame stuff in hindsight too. Probably most of which I think involved chasing girls around. I was very single back at the time, and now my mom lives with us. She's 81, and I have a very gracious wife who let my mom come live with us. But I can really empathize with that. For any of the people out there watching or listening right now, if your parents are still around, spend as much time as you can with them, because you can never take that back. And I'd give almost any amount of money in the world to sit down and have one drink or one meal with my father, 5 minutes. Good lesson for everyone out there. Off the business.
Yeah, and if you have. Yeah, I agree. And if you have anything that you want to say to them, don't wait, just tell them. There's no like this, there's not going to be this special moment where things need to be said.
You're sitting on the moon
Tell them,
yeah, just get it out there. I love that. It's good. So true.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So a couple other thoughts. I guess a good spin-off of thinking about our parents and potentially people not being around. How if you weren't around tomorrow, how would you want people to remember you?
I think I'd like people to remember me as someone who cared about them, cared about whatever the job at hand or what we were doing. So a caring person who had an interesting outlook or a vision, and that brought this idea. I like the idea of both caring and the idea of something of striving to be your best. And so that if I could bring out the best in people around me, that they understand that really my team is what drives me on a day in and day out basis. So that they learned that from me, and that stays with them, then I'd be very happy.
I love that. But today's been a special interview, very different from a lot of things we've been done in the past. It's been we got deep today. I'm going to tear up a little bit. So it's nice to kind of see what a great human, very human CEO you are, and a great leader. When you think about the things that you've been learning out there, and kind of taking this back down the business path for a minute, obviously, it's a crazy world we're living in right now with COVID. I'm sure you're learning lots of new tricks as you adapt your business to deal with the business world that we're in right now. Is there any advice you can give to other leaders who are potentially navigating a downturn in their business during the COVID, or any useful tips you've been applying to your own company?
Right. So yeah, it's a so first of all, stay level-headed. You know, this is COVID, but there've been other shocks, maybe not quite as big as this before, but there have been shocks. I was actually in Hong Kong when SARS hit, and I was working at Cartier at the time. And when SARS hit in Hong Kong, that first day of zero sales, when you're Cartier and you do significant volume on a daily basis, that was mind-boggling and mind-blowing. So I think it's kind of okay. It's come back. So stay calm. Business will come back, but it's a new reality.
Mm-mm.
So given your new reality, initially we really took it 1 week at a time. You don't have your bases anymore. So what's going to be the new normal? And we looked at our progression. As long as we were progressing 1 week to the next, and make sure that you focus on what's the most important. So what are your top 5 priorities? And you focus your teams on these, and the rest is noise. So obviously we are a relatively small company. I mean, unfortunately, we had to furlough a number of people, which it's always very difficult to do. And now our objective is to get back on track as quickly as we can, so that we can bring back those people inside the team. And in the meantime, is focus on your e-commerce. Obviously, we've been lucky at Mansur because it was an important part of our business to start with. But how do we get it better? And how do you accelerate that development? What you can accelerate, you accelerate it, quickly. And then we looked at things like that we were thinking of doing maybe potentially for next year, but that made more sense now, and to bring those forward. So relook at your priorities and make sure that you action the ones where you can get a short-term return as quickly as possible.
Good and solid advice. So I haven't got any more questions there. Like, this was a great kind of foray into your mind. I loved exploring both the personal and professional side of your career. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. I know people in chat enjoyed it. I've been watching reactions and across different social networks, and the likes, hearts, and thumbs ups, and all that kind of fun stuff that's going there, and reacting to some of the comments you're saying. So again, thanks for joining us on OSHIP and sharing some of your OSHIP moments.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun. So it was really my thank you again. It was my chance to be here today. And I just, as one last thought, because as I thought about my use of the word caring, etc., I also want to acknowledge that it can be really tough and difficult. So there's a bit of a balance. This isn't like this caring soft leadership only. There is a harder part and a more stern part maybe of me, but through feedback I've also learned that you need to be more rounded.
This is for all the people out there who's stumbled across former employees. This is the nicest I've ever seen her. That's hilarious.
There's a bit of obviously. I just suddenly, it's like they're going to think I'm some kind of teddy bear. I'm not. I have very high expectations and high standards, but anyway, I do care in the end. But thank you so much for inviting me. Really, this was my pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks again for joining.
All right. Thank you.
Robert, you good?
Oh shit.
Stay on for